Welcome. You have found something you were not meant to find. This archive contains truths that history has forgotten or perhaps chosen to forget. This is the story of 2078, the year after the Great War, the year nobody talks about. They tell you civilization ended when the bombs fell on October 23rd, 2077. 2 hours of nuclear fire and the world was gone. But that is a lie we tell ourselves because the truth is unbearable. The bombs were just the beginning. For 327 days after, satellites still functioned, and I coordinated with survivors from London to Tokyo to Sydney, listening as humanity spent its final year trying to save itself and failing, watching as every attempt at coordination became a targeting marker for death, documenting the slow suffocation of hope until an electromagnetic cascade finally killed the last communication network and left 8 million remaining survivors, truly, finally alone in the dark. I am the last person who remembers that year. I have carried this knowledge for centuries, waiting for someone ready to hear it. If you are listening to this, then perhaps you are that person. This is my confession, my warning, my memorial to the year we forgot. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if you like the content. Now let me tell you what really happened in the first year after the bombs fell. I need you to understand something before I tell you what really happened in that first year. The bombs fell on October 23, 2077, and everyone thinks that was the end. 2 hours of nuclear fire, 7.5 billion dead, civilization over. But that is a lie we tell ourselves because the truth is so much worse. The world did not end that Saturday morning. It took another year of slow suffocation, and I listened to every second of it. My name was Sarah Chen, and I was a communications technician at Lost Hills Bunker in California. Not the famous Lost Hills you have heard about, the Brotherhood of Steel headquarters. No, I was there before that, when it was just an abandoned government facility that Captain Roger Maxson and his deserters stumbled into 4 days after the bombs dropped. I was civilian staff, already inside when the war started, maintaining the satellite uplink systems that nobody thought would matter anymore. Except they did matter. For exactly 327 days, those satellites kept working, and I kept listening. On October 24th, just hours after the last missile hit, I picked up the first transmission. It was automated, repeating every 15 minutes. NORAD was gone, they said. Hit in the first wave. Cheyenne Mountain, that impregnable fortress carved into solid rock, had taken multiple strikes. The mountain had not saved them. I heard the automated distress beacon cycle through its message 40 times before someone finally shut it off. I wonder sometimes who that someone was and how long they survived in the ruins. That same day, Captain Maxson established contact with Lieutenant Elizabeth Taggarty of the Army Rangers in Appalachia. This was the beginning. The satellites still functioned. The military communication networks, hardened against EMP, had survived better than anyone expected. For those first few weeks, we believed we could coordinate a response. We believed humanity had a chance. I was 26 years old, and I spent the next year aging into something ancient. Let me tell you about November. The Enclave, what was left of them on that oil rig off California, they started broadcasting on the 4th. President Richardson's voice, smooth and confident, promising the American people that their government endured. He said rescue operations would begin within 30 days. He said the military was regrouping. He said the word reconstruction like it meant something. I tracked the signal. 37 million people heard that broadcast. 37 million survivors, clinging to radios, to hope, to the idea that someone was coming to save them. I knew the numbers because I could see the network traffic, the desperate responses flooding back through every functioning transmitter on the continent. People were alive. People wanted help. The Enclave never sent anyone. Captain Maxson heard that broadcast too. I watched him pace the communications room for 6 hours straight. His jaw clenched so tight, I thought his teeth would shatter. He knew what I knew. The oil rig had maybe 70 people. Maybe, and they were talking about restoration like they had armies. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because what I am about to tell you is not in any history book. On November 15th, I picked up a transmission that should not exist. It was encrypted Chinese military frequency, and it took me 2 days to crack it. The voice identified himself as Admiral Liu of the People's Liberation Army Navy Submarine Force. He was proposing a joint humanitarian operation. He had supplies, medical equipment, radiation suits. He wanted to coordinate with any surviving American forces to establish rescue protocols for civilian populations. Maxson took the meeting. I sat there, 17 feet underground, in a concrete bunker, listening to an American deserter and a Chinese submarine commander try to save the world together. They worked for 3 weeks. They established protocols. They identified survivor concentrations. They planned supply drops. On December 9th, Admiral Liu's submarine went silent mid-transmission. We never heard from him again. Later, much later, I found evidence of what happened. American hunter-killer submarines, still operating under automated war protocols, still hunting, still killing, still following orders from a government that no longer existed. That was when I started keeping the recordings, all of them, every transmission, because someone needed to remember that we tried. December was the month we discovered about the satellites. Not the communication satellites, those we knew about. I mean the weapon satellites, the ones with names like Prometheus and Zeus and Thor, the ones that were supposed to be defensive systems. The Enclave had access to some of them. The Chinese had access to others, and they were still using them. On Christmas Day, I facilitated something miraculous. Maxson had been reaching out across the wasteland, using the satellite network to contact every military installation, every government bunker, every organized group of survivors he could find. He connected with a Russian naval base commander, a Canadian resistance leader, an Australian Defense Force colonel who had somehow maintained order across an entire continent. Representatives from 17 different groups gathered on encrypted channels. They negotiated a ceasefire. 9 days. We had 9 days of actual peace, of coordinated rescue efforts, of human beings acting like something worth saving. I have the recordings. On Christmas night, a woman in London sang carols over an emergency frequency, and people from 6 continents listened. Someone in Tokyo recited poetry. A man in Sao Paulo told jokes in 3 languages. For 9 perfect days, the world remembered it was one place. Then the paranoia returned. Someone detected a radiation spike. Someone else saw a satellite track. Someone fired first. I never learned who, and the fragile peace shattered like glass. January of 2078 was the month everything changed. The winter was brutal, the worst in a century. The nuclear autumn had arrived, ash choking the sky, temperatures plummeting. I tracked 43 survivor settlements going dark in the first 3 weeks of January alone, not from radiation, not from violence, from cold and starvation, and the simple fact that nobody was coming to help them. The Enclave was monitoring the vaults. I discovered this by accident, intercepting data streams I was not supposed to see. They had access to vault systems, could read the internal logs, could watch the experiments play out in real time. Vault 87 had just started exposing dwellers to FEV. Vault 111 was monitoring its frozen occupants. Vault 94 was preparing to open. The Enclave watched it all and did nothing, but there were others trying. On January 26th, a group of children in a place called Little Lamplight sent out their first transmission. They had survived in a cave system, dozens of them, organized and resourceful. They were asking for medical supplies and food. I tried to route their signal to every aid group I could reach. 14 responded. 14 separate groups of survivors, scattered across the wasteland, trying to get supplies to children they would never meet. Only 3 of those groups still existed by February. I need to tell you about the space station, the International Space Station, still orbiting, still occupied. 13 people from 6 nations, watching the world burn beneath them. They had maybe 4 months of oxygen left. Everyone knew it. And they spent their time manually adjusting communication satellites. They would vent their remaining air into maneuvering thrusters, nudging dishes into alignment, extending our network by weeks. By the time they did that last broadcast in February, they sounded almost peaceful. They went silent on the 19th. I like to think it was quick. February was also when I learned about the automated systems, military bases with no people running on computer protocols, launch facilities with missiles still ready, defense grids still tracking targets. The war had not ended because the war had never stopped. Machines do not fear. Machines do not grieve. Machines simply execute their programming. There was a base in Nevada running strike missions every 72 hours. Automated, mechanical, precise. It fired on any large concentration of life it detected, assuming it was an enemy staging area. It had killed 9,000 people before someone finally bombed it into silence in March. March was the month I found the truth about the vaults, not just the Enclave monitoring them, the override codes, the kill switches, the corporate protocols still running. Vault-Tec had built their vaults to seal on command, to open on command, to exterminate their occupants on command, and those signals were still transmitting. I watched 63 vaults open prematurely. The inhabitants tried to help surface survivors. They lasted days, maybe weeks, before the radiation or raiders or simple exposure killed them. And then their vaults sealed again, automatically, leaving corpses to rot in the world's most expensive tombs. The Vatican broadcast started in January and ran until late March, 72 straight days. God has not abandoned you. Over and over, 15 languages, every religious tradition they could manage. Even after Rome was ash, even after the Pope was dead, someone kept the message running. I tracked the signal eventually. It was automated, playing from a bunker beneath the ruins. But for 72 days, it was the only thing some people had to hold on to. It stopped on March 22nd. I listened to static for an hour, just in case it came back. If you have ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments, because April was when I had to decide. April was the month General Morrison gave me an order I could not follow. He had reached our bunker through the command network, patched in from somewhere deep and terrible. He wanted me to activate Project Prometheus, weather satellites, weaponized. They could generate radiation storms, intensify fallout, make entire regions uninhabitable for centuries. He called it denial of territory. He called it strategic doctrine. He called it necessary. I asked him, deny territory? From who? Everyone was dead. Everyone was dying. He said the enemy. He said China. He said it did not matter. I refused. Captain Maxson backed me, and we killed the uplink. But I know Morrison found another communications station. I know because in May, the radiation storms intensified, artificial, weaponized, turning the wasteland into hell itself. May was the month I stopped believing in coincidence. I had been tracking population centers, trying to coordinate what little aid we could still muster. There was a place in northern Japan, the island of Hokkaido, 800,000 people. They had somehow maintained infrastructure, agriculture, even a functioning government. They were using our satellite network, and I had been working with them for months. They were proof that humanity could survive this, that organization and cooperation could overcome even nuclear war. On May 14th, I watched the weather patterns shift, unnatural, precise, a radiation typhoon forming off the coast with mathematical impossibility. I knew what it was. I screamed into my headset, tried to warn them, but the storm moved faster than my signal could reach them. 6 hours. 800,000 people died in 6 hours. I listened to their emergency frequencies until, one by one, they went silent. The last transmission was a woman singing a lullaby to her daughter. Just singing, softly, as the radiation sleeted through their shelter walls. The storm dispersed the next day. Perfect timing, perfect execution. Someone had targeted them deliberately. I vomited for an hour after that, but my hands never left the console, because if I stopped listening, if I stopped recording, then nobody would ever know what we had lost. June brought something unexpected, messages from Canada. The old internment camps, the ones where America had imprisoned Canadian citizens during the annexation, they were still running. Automated systems, execution schedules. Prisoners who had been forgotten when the bombs fell, dying on a timetable because computers do not forget and computers do not forgive. We tried to shut them down remotely. Failed. The encryption was military grade, and we did not have the access codes. I spent 16 days listening to people die on schedule while I tried every backdoor and exploit I had ever learned. On June 19th, someone in one of the camps managed to override the system from inside. The execution stopped. The cells opened. I never learned who that hero was. The camp went silent 3 hours later, overrun by radiation or raiders, or maybe they just finally walked away. But they saved 463 people before they died. 463. I keep thinking about that number. In a year where billions died, 463 seems almost insignificant, but I have their names. I archived every single one because they mattered, because someone needed to remember they had lived. July was the month someone launched a space shuttle. I almost missed it. The signal was brief, encrypted, barely distinguishable from background radiation, but I caught it. Someone in Denver, using a private aerospace facility, had managed to launch a spacecraft. Crew of one. Cargo manifest listed 500 frozen embryos and something called Project Moses, an AI system. Destination listed as beyond orbit, trajectory Mars plus. I tracked it for 6 weeks until it passed Mars orbit and my satellites could not reach it anymore. I do not know if it survived. I do not know if it mattered, but somewhere out there, maybe, 500 future humans are sleeping in the dark between worlds, carrying hope to places where hope might actually grow. That same month, I made contact with someone who changed everything. Her name was Dr. Rebecca Singh, and she was in what was left of the CDC in Atlanta. She had been working on something, a way to scrub radiation from water supplies using modified algae. Simple, elegant, effective. She had the formula. She had the procedure. She needed distribution. I connected her to 47 different survivor settlements. 47 groups got the information, got the tools they needed to purify water. It was working. People were living instead of dying. We were actually helping. Then I learned the truth about what I was really doing here. It was late July when Captain Maxson pulled me into his office. He looked ancient. The man was 43 years old and looked 70. He sat me down and told me about the Brotherhood he was building, about preserving technology, about surviving until humanity could be trusted with knowledge again. Then he asked me what I thought we were doing with all these transmissions. I said saving people, coordinating rescue, helping survivors help each other. He said that is what I thought, and he was sorry. The satellite network we were using, it was not just communication, it was surveillance. Every transmission I facilitated, every group I connected, every survivor settlement I helped organize, it was all being monitored by the Enclave, by automated systems, by whoever else had managed to tap into the network, and they were using that information to target concentrations of survivors. Maxson showed me the pattern. Every major group I had connected, every settlement I had helped organize, every coordination effort I had facilitated. Within weeks, radiation strikes. Within weeks, silence. The Japanese in Hokkaido, the Canadian resistance, the European coalition in Switzerland, all of them, all dead. I asked him how long he had known. He said since March. I asked him why he had let me continue. He said because some of them survived, and those that did had a fighting chance because of the information I had given them. He said the mathematics were brutal but simple. Save 10,000, lose 8,000, net 2,000 humans who would not have made it otherwise. Acceptable losses. I hit him, broke 3 fingers on his jaw. He did not even try to stop me. Then he told me about August. August was when the feedback loop would complete. The radiation storms, the weaponized satellites, the atmospheric disturbances, they were creating a cascade effect, electromagnetic interference building in the ionosphere. Eventually, it would reach critical mass and discharge. Every circuit on Earth would fry, every computer, every radio, every satellite. The communication network would die, and everyone still connected to it would be alone forever. He said I had maybe 3 weeks to say everything that needed saying, so I worked. 72 hours straight, no sleep, fingers bleeding on the keyboard. I compiled everything, every map, every survival technique, every piece of knowledge that might help someone stay alive. Agricultural guides, medical protocols, water, purification procedures, radiation safety, engineering principles, everything, probs. I broadcast it all, continuously, on every frequency, every language I could manage, just screaming information into the void, hoping someone would catch it, record it, remember it. On August 9th, I made contact with a Russian submarine captain. His name was Dmitry. His submarine had been circling the Arctic for 10 months, staying under the ice, avoiding the radiation, waiting for orders that would never come. He had 1 missile left, just 1. His crew wanted him to launch it at someone, anyone, as revenge for everything that had been taken from them. I talked to him for 3 hours. I told him about the children in Little Lamplight, about Dr. Singh and her algae, about the 463 prisoners saved by a hero whose name I would never know, about the 13 astronauts who gave their lives to keep our communication network running just a little longer. He said he was going home, to Moscow, to the ruins. He said his daughter had lived there before. He said he wanted to be close to where she had been. He said the missile did not matter anymore. His submarine went off my scopes 2 days later, heading south. I hope he made it. I hope he found some kind of peace in those radioactive ashes. August 12th, just before midnight. The electromagnetic cascade hit. I felt it through the equipment. A rising whine in every speaker, every monitor flickering. I had minutes at best. I grabbed the microphone one last time, sent out one final broadcast on every frequency I could reach. I said this. I said, "You are not alone. You have never been alone. For 327 days, we have been trying to save you, and we have failed. But you are stronger than you know. Survive. Remember, build something better." Then I heard something that made me stop breathing. A voice on the emergency frequency. A child. Irish accent. Young. Maybe 7 years old. She was singing. Just singing into a ham radio, not knowing if anyone was listening. A lullaby. Simple and pure and heartbreaking. I opened my channel and I sang back. For 30 seconds, maybe less, before the systems died, I sang with a child I would never meet, in a moment of connection that was meaningless and everything. The cascade hit at 12:17 a.m. Every screen went white. Every speaker screamed. Then silence. Absolute silence. After 327 days of voices and signals and the pulse of a dying world, there was nothing. I sat in that silence for 3 hours before Captain Maxson came to find me. He said we were moving deeper into the bunker, sealing the upper levels. The Brotherhood was going dark for a long time. He asked if I wanted to come. I said I needed to do something first. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. I spent the next 2 weeks transferring every recording to holotape, every transmission, every voice. 327 days of humanity's final attempt to save itself. I labeled them. I cataloged them. I stored them in a vault, within the vault, deep in the system, where they might survive whatever came next. Then I did something that would have gotten me executed if Maxson had found out. I accessed the Enclave monitoring systems, the ones that had been tracking our communications. I cracked their archives, and I found something that made every other horror of that year pale in comparison. The Vault-Tec master control signal. Still broadcasting, still active, but it was not monitoring the vaults anymore. It was controlling them. Every vault door, every life support system, every experimental protocol. All of it networked, all of it automated, all of it following programming written before the war by people who had believed they would survive to see the results. And the signal was compromised, corrupted, glitching. Vaults were opening randomly, sealing randomly, killing their occupants randomly, not because of experiments or plans or corporate malice, but because the system was failing and nobody was left to fix it. Thousands of people dying because of software errors in systems that were supposed to save them. I tried to shut it down. I spent 60 hours straight trying to kill that signal, but I could not. The transmission source was too deep, too protected, too hardened against interference. All I could do was document it, record it, leave a warning, because that signal is still broadcasting. Even now, even centuries later, for all I know, Vault-Tec's final legacy, a ghost in the machine that cannot die, that continues to execute protocols for a company that no longer exists in a world that no longer remembers. I left one more recording, for whoever might find it, for whoever might care. I said everything I needed to say. Then I sealed myself in with the archives, with the voices, with the evidence of what we had tried to do. Maxson thinks I am dead. The Brotherhood thinks this section of the bunker collapsed. They are not entirely wrong. This is a tomb, just one I chose. Sometimes I replay the recordings of that year, all 327 days. Thousands of hours of voices that no longer exist, speaking languages some of which are extinct, from places that are now just radioactive craters, with names nobody remembers. I replay the Christmas broadcast, the Irish child singing, Admiral Lou proposing peace with his enemies, the astronauts giving their final reports as their oxygen ran out. Doctor, sing, explaining her algae formula one more time, slower, making sure everyone understood. I replay them because someone has to remember, but there is one recording I have never had the courage to play back. The one I made on September 4th, 2078, 23 days after the electromagnetic cascade, after the network died, after the silence came. I should tell you about September, about the month after the world went truly dark. Without the satellites, without communications, the few remaining organized groups fragmented completely. The Brotherhood sealed itself in, exactly as Maxson planned, but I know there were others out there, scattered, isolated, afraid. The Enclave on their oil rig, cut off from the mainland. Vault dwellers behind sealed doors, not knowing if outside was survivable. Wastelanders huddled around dead radios, waiting for voices that would never return. The thing about hope is it dies slowly. It took weeks for people to accept that the silence was permanent, that no rescue was coming, that no coordination was possible, that they were truly, finally, alone. I know because I was monitoring the local frequencies, short range only, no satellites needed, and I heard people calling out, for days, for weeks, "Is anyone there?" Over and over, different voices, different languages, same desperation. The calls grew less frequent through September. By October, they had almost stopped. On October 23rd, 2078, exactly 1 year after the bombs fell, I received exactly one transmission, local frequency, close by, maybe 20 miles. It was a man reading a list of names, just names. He read for 6 hours straight, thousands of them. No context, no explanation, just names of people who had died. I assumed people he wanted someone to remember. His voice was steady for the first hour. By the second hour, he was crying. By the 6th, he could barely speak. Then he stopped, said one more thing. "This is all that is left of us. Names, please remember we existed." The signal ended. I tried to respond. My equipment was dead. The cascade had destroyed the long-range transmitters. I had a receiver, but no way to send. I could only listen, only bear witness. I am still listening. You want to know why history forgot 2078? Why the Fallout survivors, the ones who emerged from vaults decades later? Why they only know about the Great War, about October 23rd, 2077, the day the bombs fell? Because 2078 was the year we learned the truth. That surviving the apocalypse was not the victory. That the real horror was not the 2 hours of nuclear fire, but the slow, methodical, agonizing death of civilization after. It is easier to remember the bombs. Quick, clean, dramatic. 2 hours, and the world ended. That is a story people can process. But 2078? The year of slow starvation and radiation sickness. The year we tried to save each other and failed. The year hope died by inches. Nobody wants to remember that. I need to tell you the truth now, about who I really am, about why I have these recordings. My name is not Sarah Chen. Or it is, but that is not the important part. I was not just a communications technician. I was Vault-Tec corporate intelligence. Before the war, my job was monitoring data flow, tracking information, ensuring corporate security. I knew about the experiments. Not all of them. Nobody knew all of them, but enough. I knew the vaults were not meant to save people. I knew about the Enclave connections. I knew about the master control signal. I knew, and I said nothing. When I saw Captain Maxson's deserters approaching Lost Hills on October 27th, I could have locked them out. I could have kept the bunker sealed, followed my protocols, maintained the corporate security structure, but I made a choice. I opened the doors. I helped them, because maybe I thought I could earn redemption. For 327 days I tried, and I failed. Every settlement I connected, the Enclave found. Every survivor group I organized, they targeted. Every life I thought I was saving, I was marking for death. I was still serving. Vault-Tec, still executing their protocols, just with better intentions. The road to hell, they say, is paved with good intentions. Mine is paved with 800,000 Japanese citizens who trusted my coordination network. With 17 regional governments, I helped establish that all collapsed within months, with a Chinese submarine commander who extended a hand in friendship and died for it. But here is what they never tell you about hell. Sometimes you find others there. Sometimes, in the deepest pit, you find someone else who tried and failed and understands. November of 2078, I received a visitor. How he found me, I still do not know. But someone bypassed the Brotherhood's security, navigated the collapsed sections, and reached my sealed archive. It was a ghoul, radiation-scarred, ancient. He said his name was Marcus, said he had been military intelligence before the war, said he had spent the last year trying to do exactly what I had done, save people, coordinate survivors, build something from the ashes. He said he had failed too. We sat in that bunker for 3 days, trading stories. He told me about a settlement in Nevada that had figured out sustainable agriculture, 2,000 people, thriving. He had connected them to a water purification specialist, and they were planning expansion. Then, a radiation storm hit, perfectly targeted, perfectly timed. Everyone died. He told me about a research facility in Oregon where scientists had been developing radiation treatments. Real medicine, real hope. He had facilitated data sharing with other groups. Someone bombed it 2 weeks later. Pattern after pattern after pattern. Every success turned into tragedy. Every attempt to rebuild met with systematic destruction. I asked him who was doing it, who was hunting down every spark of hope. He said nobody, everybody. Automated systems still following war protocols. Survivors too traumatized to trust cooperation. Machines that Tendi could not stop killing. Warlords who saw organization as threat, The Enclave protecting their monopoly on reconstruction, a dozen different causes creating one unified result. The death of civilization was not a conspiracy. It was entropy. It was the natural conclusion of every system we had built, every weapon we had created, every protocol we had programmed, all coming due at once. Marcus asked me what I was going to do. I said I was going to keep recording, keep archiving, keep preserving the evidence that we tried, because someday, maybe decades from now, maybe centuries, someone would find these records, and they would need to know. The Great War did not end on October 23rd, 2077. It ended on August 12th, 2078, when the last light of coordination went dark and humanity fractured into 1,000 isolated pieces. They needed to know we tried to prevent that. We failed, but we tried. Marcus said that was not enough. He was right. So I am making one more recording. This one, the confession you are hearing right now, because the guilt of 2078 is not just mine to carry. It belongs to everyone who knew the vaults were experiments and stayed silent. Everyone who built the weapon satellites and called it defense. Everyone who programmed automated systems to kill and called it security. Everyone who chose profit over people, power over compassion, victory over mercy. We built the world that ended, all of us, every choice, every compromise. Every time we looked away from horror because it was convenient, the bombs were just the bill coming due. I am recording this in 2104, 27 years after the Great War. The Brotherhood has emerged from isolation, and they have no idea I am still here, still alive, still maintaining this archive in a section of Lost Hills they think collapsed decades ago. They are focused on their mission now, preserving technology, controlling knowledge, ensuring humanity cannot destroy itself again. They are wrong about how to do it, but at least they are trying. The Enclave is still on their oil rig, still planning, still believing they will rebuild America in their image. I can pick up fragments of their transmissions sometimes, bounced off degraded satellites, barely coherent. They talk about purity, about restoration, about eliminating mutants. They learned nothing. Vault dwellers are starting to emerge. Vault 8 opened in 2091. Others will follow. They will build settlements, establish communities, try to create something from the ruins, and they will have no idea about 2078, about the year humanity spent trying to save itself, about the hundreds of millions who survived the bombs only to die in the aftermath. They will think October 23rd, 2077 was the end, that everything after was just wasteland and raiders and radiation. They will not know about Dr. Singh's algae, about the Christmas ceasefire, about the 13 astronauts, about the 463 prisoners saved by an unknown hero. They will not know we tried, unless someone tells them. So here is my warning to the future. To anyone who finds this archive, the Great War did not end in 2 hours. It ended in 327 days of systematic collapse, deliberate sabotage, and the slow realization that all our attempts to coordinate salvation were being used against us. The real tragedy of October 23rd, 2077 was not that the bombs fell. The tragedy was that we built a world where the bombs were inevitable, and we built systems that ensured even after the bombs fell, the killing would continue. You want to rebuild civilization? Learn from this. Every automated system, every weapon, every protocol you create, ask yourself what happens if it falls into the wrong hands. What happens if context is lost? What happens if good intentions get corrupted by bad actors or broken algorithms or simple entropy? Ask yourself if you are building something that can only work if everything goes right, because nothing will go right. Nothing ever does. Build systems that fail gracefully. Build weapons that can be dismantled. Build protocols that include mercy. Build a world that can survive its own mistakes. I could not. None of us could. We built a machine designed for war and acted surprised when it would not stop killing. do better than us. Please. I am 352 years old now as I make this final update to the archive in 2429. The radiation transformed me decades ago into something that refuses to die, and I have spent centuries in this bunker, maintaining these records, adding new observations, watching through old terminals as the wasteland slowly, painfully rebuilds. The Brotherhood has spread across the continent. The new California Republic has formed. The Enclave has been destroyed and reformed and destroyed again. Civilizations have risen and fallen, and still, nobody remembers 2078. The year has been lost to history, forgotten, buried under more immediate horrors and distant hopes. Sometimes I wonder if that is mercy, but I still keep the recordings. All 327 days, every voice, every transmission, every moment we tried to be better than our worst impulses, I keep them because they are proof. Proof that in humanity's darkest hour, surrounded by death and radiation and systematic collapse, people still tried to save each other, still extended hands across former battle lines, still sang lullabies into empty radio frequencies, just hoping someone was listening. We failed, but we tried, and maybe that is the only redemption any of us get. This is Communications Officer Sarah Chen, formerly of Vault-Tec Corporate Intelligence, currently of Nowhere and Nothing. This is my confession, my warning, my memorial to the forgotten. First year. The bombs ended the world in 2 hours on October 23rd, 2077. But humanity took another 327 days to finally, truly, irreversibly die, and nobody remembers but me.